Greetings, CSWS colleagues. Happy 50th anniversary.
We really wanted to focus on CSWS as an utterly interdisciplinary research center and bring into the celebrations all our partners across campus. So we made collaboration a keystone of planning for the 50th. And so we were able to collaborate really broadly, not only with research units, but also with those units on campus that are focused on performance and creative practice. For example, we did a concert at the School of Music and Dance. We opened 2 significant art shows themed Feminist Futures in collaboration with the GSMA and faculty from the College of Design. We also collaborated with the Cinema Studies Department, the Comic Studies Department, with the Common Reading Project, focused on reproductive justice and reproductive rights. We also collaborated with the School of Journalism and Communications to bring to campus former editor of The New Yorker, Tina Brown. Since Tina Brown helmed a magazine, The New Yorker, whose founder, Jane Grant, established the center. So that was a really fun collaboration to bring someone back from The New Yorker magazine to celebrate Jane Grant's legacy. We also collaborated with colleagues in STEM fields to do a negotiation workshop. The sort of like marquee event for the 50th was also a partnership with the Wayne Moss Center, where we brought on board Professor Anita Hill for a public lecture, followed by an alumni symposium, where we invited back our alums to help us define feminist futures.
The Alumni Symposium was our culminating event for our entire year of 50th anniversary activities. The event featured 3 main panels. One panel was on the leadership of CSWS, and we discussed on that panel what it took to shape a feminist research center. We had a second panel that focused on our special projects, initiatives, and research interest groups over time and those long-term impacts from those activities. And then we had a third panel that focused on people who received grant funding from CSWS, and specifically our Jane Grant dissertation fellows and the long-term impacts of that funding for their research and teaching over time.
Hello, my name is Barbara Sutton, and I graduated from the University of Oregon in 2004 with a PhD in sociology. I was very fortunate to receive the Jane Grant Dissertation Award, which funded my research on body politics in Argentina, which eventually became part of my book. And actually, my first book, Security Disarmed, was an outgrowth of a conference that I helped organize with CSWS on gender, race, and militarization.
It was extremely important to receive the support of the Center for the Study of Women in Society on many levels, because my dissertation, well, first of all, economically, of course, allowed me the time I needed so that I didn't have to teach, and I could, just exclusively devote my time to the dissertation and the remaining little bit of research that I needed to do to pull everything together. On another level, since my dissertation deals with representations of AIDS, gender is an extremely important part of that in terms of communities that were enacting resistance against authoritarian regimes, which, where my research focused on were countries where authoritarianism was causing the communities not to be able to respond to AIDS when it first started out. It was a decade before they were able to really address the issues. It showed that my research was very relevant to the interests of the study of women in society.
As part of the 50th, we invited our grant alumni to give testimonials about the impacts and benefits of CSWS, both on their research and in their careers more broadly.
I am very grateful to CSWS for the positive impact that the center has had on my research, on my life, on my career, my work. I initially became acquainted with the center as a doctoral student. Sandra Morgan, who was the director at the time, was my mentor, and she was very influential in my life, and she introduced me to many of the activities of the center.
Sandy Morgan was a cultural anthropologist, and she made tremendous contributions to cultural anthropology, but she also was a very strong leader in CSWS, so she was a real inspiration as well. And CSWS has always invited many wonderful speakers to campus. There were a lot of social functions, and I found that these were really critically important to me, both as a new mother as well as an academic trying to balance those things. I felt a lot of support from CSWS that was especially important in my first half of my career here at the U of O. I had some articles in preparation about gender archaeologically. So I was preparing these articles for publication, but I also early on started in on a reading group through CSWS that was with Marie Vituli and Sarah Douglas, longtime U of O faculty members, now emerita as well. And we did a lot of reading of feminist critiques of science. And I found that that important reading that we did in that reading group really helped me become a critical theorist in archaeology and empowered me to do some critiques and to change the direction in some respects of my field.
CSWS was always a place that felt exciting, vibrant. It was also a place that felt like home, that I wanted to go to, that was welcoming, that it had that sense of care and solidarity, and that nurtured a kind of academic inquiry based on cooperation. And I learned so many skills there. I gained organizing skills, leadership skills that I still carry with me today.
Hi, my name is Ryan Pilgrim, and I'm a 2010 graduate at the University of Oregon, where I earned my doctorate in sociology with a certificate in women's and gender studies. And I was an active participant in the Center for the Study of Women in Society. After leaving the University of Oregon, I was a faculty member at the University of Idaho for 13 years. And some of my most notable achievements as an academic was a book I published called Pushed Out, which looked at rural gentrification in the American West, and my research on women in agriculture. I ran USDA grants examining the experiences and inequalities women in agriculture faced, and brought in over $1 million of funding to run those projects. I left academia a couple years ago and now work in the nonprofit sphere, supporting communities in transition and economic transition, and really thinking about just transition for oil and gas communities. The Center for the Study of Women in Society shaped my experiences both as a student, in my career as an academic, and contemporarily in my nonprofit role working on just transitions. I think because it gave me a really intersectional and relational thinking about how people and structures impact people's experiences. So when I'm thinking about and doing work, policy work on behalf of communities, I'm always trying to think about who's being impacted in a very holistic way.
I am Barbara Corrado Pope. I was the first director of Women's Studies. I believe I came here in 1975 or 1976. I had the fun of being the first woman to do a few things. One is I was the first woman to win this sort of citizenship award of promoting citizenship in the University of Oregon. I won a teaching award, and I was the first director of the Honors College. I got a few grants, and the particular grant that I did with CSWS was the sort of next step of teaching about women in women's history and women's studies classes, and that is to integrate the work of ethnic studies, racial, women scholars into the curriculum as a whole. And I called it a university for everyone.
Well, you know, when I first started at Oregon as an undergraduate student in sociology, that was in 1969, and there was no Center for the Study of Women and Society, and actually there was none until after I graduated. And by the way, it was 69 that I graduated from the university at 65 when I first came to the university. And I got there about the same time as Mrs. Acker did, later Professor Acker, and of course, one of the founders of the center. And I was floundering around personally and, well, I guess you'd say avocationally or vocationally, not even sure I wanted to be in school. After my first year, I was assigned to Mrs. Acker as one of her advisees, because everybody else in the sociology department was a big deal, full professor, and certainly not dabbling in things like as mundane and pedestrian as social work. So at any rate, that's how I got to know Mrs. Acker, and very quickly she gave me a sense of actually having some value and being able to do something worthwhile.
My dissertation, which regrettably, my fault, never turned into a book, but into a number of articles, was called Mothers and Daughters in Early 19th Century Paris. And doing this dissertation made me part of a generation of people who really created women's history. We built by having conferences together. We built by caucusing at conferences. One caucus, the women's historian got together and said, look, 1920s, there were a lot of books on women's history, and after that it died out because the first movement died out. We have to make sure that doesn't happen. We're going to get into the textbooks. So there was a strategy and a generation.
I'll tell you, when I made the little contribution, such as it was, to the 50th anniversary thing, when people were, I of course attended the whole thing, and when people were singing her as well as, I think it's Dr. Morgan's praises, but I couldn't, I can't tell you how my heart swelled and my soul swelled, and it was just that I really had been in touch with one of the jewels of my era.
I'm Amanda Powell. I taught at University of Oregon from 1991 to 2018. My work was repeatedly supported by CSWS in so many ways, through grants for travel, especially for research, work in progress talks, both mine and yours, and all the support that gave intellectually, the presence of invited speakers, interactions at events, and our research interest group that went on for years, Reclaiming the Past. That was a really important forum for me.
My name is Anita Weiss. I have been at the U of O since January 1988. My expertise is on Pakistan, political Islam, women's rights, and how they all merge together. CSWS has provided me over the years with invaluable support for my research, but I just want to say, whether you work on the United States and all, or you work internationally as I do, having CSWS here to help organize fascinating talks, as well as giving grant support for our grad students and support for travel and support for research for faculty. CSWS has indeed played a really important role on campus, and I wish it luck for the next 50 years.
I first came to CSWS in 2011, because I was hired as a special GE for the 40th anniversary celebration for the planning of events and publications that we did during that special anniversary. After that, I applied for and received the Jane Grant Dissertation Fellow for my final year as a doctoral student in the English department with a folklore emphasis. The dissertation fellowship not only allowed me a full year just to concentrate on writing and completing my dissertation, but gave me enough, barely enough, but still enough to live on for that final year. I'm not sure I would have been able to do it without that support.
I think CSWS has been pivotal in my sense of community. I love being able to be part of a group of women, like the Women of Color Project, that have really, made me really practice solidarity and have a sense of community that helps each other and shares the challenges that we're facing as women of color faculty, that we can ask questions and we can help each other, get feedback. And so I've participated in different types of events that have been really important in my career. But one of them was, for example, we were in a group where we could all share our articles and our book proposals and get feedback from each other. And that was one spring term, and it was like a workshop, and it was so useful. So those are just two of many of the many ways CSWS has impacted my research.
One of the very important things that CSWS does is it brings together people who are committed to feminist research across campus into the same rooms so that they can talk together, share ideas, share resources, and eventually collaborate and work together, where otherwise they would never have the opportunity to even meet.
The vision for the 50th developed out of a retreat that we had with Center Associates.
We came up with the theme, given it was 50 years looking back on the accomplishments of CSWS. The question that kept coming up was, what are we going to do in the next 50 years?
We decided that we would not only celebrate the 50 years of accomplishments of intersectional feminist research that the center had done, but also looking forward, we identified feminist futures as a theme that would allow us to imagine, in the face of pretty significant challenges for the project of feminism globally, what the next 50 years should look like, what kind of priorities we needed to set for that.
We're living in very hard times for feminists and for women, but I would think the best vision for the university people to follow and to think about is to connect with the community. I was very lucky. The only reason that women's studies survived is because of the community. A community of scholars all over the United States, but also the community within Eugene. And there was a very thriving women's community. There's a sense in which I think there's been a loss of connection with the very simple things. Maybe I was too simple. I taught something very simple. I taught a change in perspective, that once you know about how women and race figure into every society, it's like you turn a kaleidoscope and you can't go back. You'll never lose that vision. And I think going back to a little bit of the simplicity would be important for both the center and for academic women's studies.
I think feminists, theorists and feminists in general have a lot to contribute to today's society. We have a range of social problems, and I think that feminist analyses help us understand how power operates in today's society, who wins, who loses, and there's still a lot to contribute. And the more and more I read, the more and more I see the reach of scholars becoming broader and broader. And so that I hope that the U of O will continue to support CSWS, that CSWS will continue to be strong and support feminist research that will educate and inform people, but will also contribute to cross-cultural understanding, as well as helping to reduce some of the polarization we are experiencing in the U.S. today.
Part of what many of my students bring up in the classroom is that there are still double standards that we suffer as women, and that are really difficult to stand against sometimes. And so I think that maybe just continuing to discuss this in the classroom is a way of redefining our feminist futures. But also the Women of Project, the Women of Color project, for me, is the epitome of what I want to see as a feminist future in the UO. I think it's great that we are a group that has been growing and that hopefully continues to grow, and that continuously supports each other in diverse ways. I think professional, academically, but also personally. And so I think those connections really give a powerful take on what feminist future should look like.
I'm thinking about a feminist future in light also of what's happening in the present. And unfortunately, we are seeing a rise of authoritarianisms in many places of the world, including my country of origin, and we see it here in the US. We see it in the rolling back of abortion rights, in the attacks on education, on expansive notions of gender and sexuality. We see it on attacks of education that makes us aware of the existence of racism, the history of racism, its persistence. And we see it in attacks on feminist spaces and organizations. And so to me, a feminist future, for one, is a future that has feminism in it. And this means that the concepts, the initiatives, the spaces that feminists have created are part of our present and of our future. Even when we recognize that feminism is not conflict-free, that it is not static, that it continues to reinvent itself. It's still part of our world making. It's still part of the way we create institutions, or that we create spaces that are worthwhile. And to me, it's also a future that is founded on a democratic and fair basis, where we also recognize the ways in which we are interdependent, in which we need structures of care and solidarity. And it is a future that nurtures a deep notion of freedom, that is not a freedom of the market to not care about the livelihoods of people. It's not the freedom to carry guns that endanger communities. It's not the freedom that is based on canceling the concept that have empowered diverse and marginalized communities. So to me, it's not a world that is ruled by neoliberalism or authoritarianism, but it is a world where we can question these injustices, and it is a feminist future to the extent that it is about freedom from systems of oppression.
When I think about my vision for feminist futures, I think it's very much about trying to create a space, a world where we really fundamentally understand that our lives and our opportunities are wrapped up in the opportunities and lives of our neighbors and community more broadly. And so we really need to think about a vision for radical solidarity within our sphere of influence.
I think we have a battle ahead of us because of the political climate that's going on right now. Many authoritarian leaders are pushing back trying to reinstall the patriarchy at all the levels of society and intimidate and instill fear in people. And it's a very real thing that's happening. I see it with my students. They're suffering because they've had a period of time to be free about their gender identity and their sexuality, and now they feel like all of that is closing off to them, and their bodies, their minds, their lives are now once again under the microscope of these people that don't seem to want to understand. I think that we need to really double down on all the things that we're doing in terms of our research and creating more visibility and thinking in practical ways that we can empower our students to go out into the world and carve out the spaces that we seem to be losing.
It was very exciting for us to work with Advancement on a Duck Funder campaign. CSWS has done very well funding interdisciplinary faculty research as well as graduate students, but we found a lot of interest in our center from undergraduates. And so we decided that perhaps the Duck Funder should be focused on undergraduates. We did two initiatives. One was to fund undergraduate research in an interdisciplinary frame with gender as its focus, and the other were the Calderwood seminars, which would prepare undergraduates to speak to a public on divisive issues that had a gender intersectional focus. We felt this was particularly important in the wake of how LGBTQ and trans rights, the Dobbs decision, etc., had once again brought gender and other social identity into the public eye, and in fairly fractious and divisive ways. So we felt that we really needed to provide some support and training to students through the Calderwood seminars on how they might address a broader public on these vital issues in ways that promoted understanding and deep listening. I take guidance about what the vision for the center should be from what has worked in the past. So I think, given how successful these collaborations were, I would really like to continue down that path a little bit more. Now that we have raised the money for the Duck Funder, we need to actually work further on strengthening our connections to undergraduate students through scholarships, through fellowships, through collaborative teaching. That is definitely one of my priorities as director. I also want to work on thinking about the center as a place of training and skill building for undergraduate students. We got this off to a great start with our internship program, and I would like to see that internship program grow. And for a long time, it has been a sort of like hope and vision of the center, but this will require some more fundraising to really set up year-long postdoctoral fellowships. And I want to start us thinking about that.
And what's my vision of Feminist Futures? Sustainable. Sustainable in terms of work, gender equity, environmental questions in all senses, in tune with the powers and the knowledge of the natural world, and going well beyond our, deeply into and well beyond our concepts of interdisciplinary work, deeply liberating of our communities and still untapped creativities. So yes, again, I salute you. I wish everyone health and wonderful futures with and in spite of everything that we have going on.
I just want to add that I really, really appreciate and love Sangeeta Gopal's leadership. I think she has been a model to follow in so many ways.